Hey, friends, this is Pastor Brad Reeves. You're watching the Coming Soon Ministries podcast, and we are so excited to have today's guest, Pastor Brandon Holthaus from Rock Harbor Church. You're going to want to stick around for this conversation as we talk about America being at a crossroads and the return of communist ideology as it relates to the prophetic future. Now, this is going to be a deep conversation that you're going to want to listen to. And this is from an article that Brandon actually wrote about earlier in August. And we're going to put the link to that article from his blog into the link below. So make sure you check that out and read the article and just get connected with what Brandon is doing. Brandon is the senior pastor at Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California. He's a powerful speaker. He's got his thumb on the pulse of so much going on, not only around our country, but around the world. And he looks at it, dissects it, and examines it from a strong foundation of biblical theology. He is a prophecy conference speaker. He speaks around the world, and I'm always pleased to have him on the show with me. He's been a great friend of Coming Soon Ministries and Crossway Christian Fellowship, and he was a part of our Abraham to Armageddon conference in this past August 2026, and knocked it out of the park. Concluded our conference with an amazing message that you'll want to check out when it comes out on our YouTube channel. We'll keep you posted on when that'll be coming out. But right now, we want to bring on Brandon and talk about this important, timely topic called America at the Crossroads. Brandon, so good to see you again. How are you doing over there in Bakersfield?
Well, we're doing great. Hey, thanks for having me out there to Gettysburg. It was great seeing all the folks on the East Coast. And so thanks for putting that conference on. Looking forward to next year. It sounds like you're going to have another one, right?
Here we are. We're gearing up already for 2027. I've been getting emails, people asking about if we're going to have it again. And I'm so excited that you're able to come back out and be a part of it. Man, you hit it out of the ballpark at the as the concluding speaker. It sent people ready to charge the gates of hell with a water pistol. So good job.
Yeah, it's good. Well, we want a lot of fire under people, so that's good.
Yes, we do. And we'll be putting that video out. We'll be breaking down the videos and putting that up on our website probably throughout the fall. So be excited to have that come back out. People can check it out when it comes out there. We're going to be talking today about a really profound and timely article that you wrote on your blog site, America at the Crossroads.
Yeah. And
this is an important but distressing topic. It's hard to make light of this, but I think people aren't ready for what's coming because you subtitled it The Return of the Communist Ideology and the Prophetic Future. What prompted you to write this?
Well, what prompted me is we've been watching a steady growing interest with young people, and that's the demographic that are actually drawn to this, to socialism, Marxism, and communism. And you think, what in the world's been going on here? And what I would say is after decades and decades of indoctrination through our public schools, which is Satan's youth group, and then also Satan's colleges, our colleges and universities, we have a young adult population that is attracted to socialism, Marxism, communism. Now, they don't know all the ins and outs of it, but here's what they hear, Brad. They hear free. They hear affordable health care, affordable housing, and they don't understand what's behind that. So number one, they don't know what communism, Marxism, socialism. And then the other thing that's converging on this is the destruction of the free market economy that we have here in America because of so many socialistic programs, handouts, entitlement programs, welfare systems. For instance, California is just a welfare state. But here's the thing. It's destroyed our economy. And this has been going on. I mean, I don't even know what the debt is now. It's in the trillions, I don't know, 38, 39 trillion. I don't know what it is now. But anyway, the point is, what's happening is the younger people are being disenfranchised. The average homeowner age is about 42 years old to own a home in the United States. That's insane. So that means millennials and Gen Z cannot afford a home. And so they're stuck in renting. And here's the thing, they've bought into the lie of going to these elite colleges and universities and paying $100,000 and having that debt coming out of it. And then they can't even get a job at Starbucks with their women's history degree. And so they have been sold down the creek, so to speak, down the river, and they can't afford anything. Okay. So then you come with a disenfranchised population, and you have a Mamdani, you have, some of the Hong or whatever, all these people that are winning primaries that are communists saying, well, we need to erase debt. We need to erase school debt. We need to make affordable housing. We'll do rent control. We'll do housing control. And that is appealing to them. And then you have Gavin Newsom in my state saying capitalism or the free market system doesn't work. And so they're not totally understanding all the ins and outs of socialism, communism, Marxism, but they know they're disenfranchised, and they want some type of relief, and socialism and communism is offering that relief to them, at least in the form of theory. And so this is catching wind.
So how did this move from being a fringe part of the Democratic Party into becoming the legitimate power center of it? I mean, how did this happen?
Well, I think you go all the way back to 2016, Brad. So that's, I think, the major turning point there. And people are saying, well, what happened in 2016? That was the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign that happened. And Sanders normalized the term democratic socialist for millions of Americans. And again, they're playing with terms, Brad. Democratic socialist. Okay, he's not a communist, but he's a communist. Okay, the guy. Check this out. On his honeymoon, I went to Hawaii for my honeymoon, but this guy honeymoons in the Soviet Union. Holy smokes! What? Yeah, the homeland. Holy smokes. Okay, so then after him, he kind of normalized things. And then AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or really it's Sandra or whatever her name is, she gets a 2018 victory. And it showed that candidates associated with democratic socialism, which is nothing but communism, could defeat establishment Democrats in their primaries. That's what AOC proved. And so now, since that groundwork has been done, it's been rising, and there's been radical elements in the Democratic Party, and so much so that the younger radicals are telling people like Nancy Pelosi, get out of the way. They're telling Chuck Schumer, get out of the way. You either get on board or we're not, but we're taking over. And so now we have Zohran Mamdani, Francesca Hong, Claire Valdez, Abdul El Sayed, Donovan McKinney, William Lawrence, Milit Karos, and Darrell Chevalier in New York. And these are individuals that were running in primary. Some of them won, some of them didn't. But whoa, wait a second. They call themselves Democratic Socialists, but when you look at the website of the Democratic Socialists, it is full-blown communism. Okay, abolish the police, abolish prisons, redistribution of wealth and all that other stuff. And you read that and you're like, what in the world? And then you realize that they have about 120,000 members that claim to be part of this democratic socialism. Well, anyway, that's significant. So it's a groundswell, and it's taking over the Democratic Party. And look, the old line Democrats are not doing anything about this. You hear a few voices here and there, but they're not doing anything about it. They don't have the power anymore, apparently. So the Democratic Party is being taken over by communists, basically.
We're going to get into the Red-Green Alliance here in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to stay on the Democrats a little bit. And this isn't just politically driven. I think a lot of people are missing the fact that this is a spiritual agenda that's hiding itself in politics. Why are we treating this as just ordinary progressive politics instead of acknowledging that these people are proposing a fundamentally different America? I mean, and Obama just came out and flat out right and said it, didn't he? He said, we're going to fundamentally transform America.
Yeah.
Why have we just allowed this to happen?
Well, the problem is, and it goes back to a heresy I call pietism that developed in the 17th century or 16th century. And it developed, and this is what pietism taught. It taught that Christianity is a spiritual kingdom, and this is a misinterpretation of the kingdom, and that we have no dealings with this world. And so we need to retreat from that. We need to just focus in on our sanctification, and that's it. And not worry about being salt and light, about doing the Great Commission, about shining the light on the darkness, about contending for the faith. That didn't enter the equation. And here's the interesting backstory on pietism. It developed because a lot of the public officials during that period of time in Europe and kings did not like pastors commenting on how bad they were doing. Okay, so this fit the mode. And what ended up happening, this development of pietism actually got supported by public officials because it kept the churches silent on commenting on what was going on during the day. And that developed. And so it continued to develop all through Europe, and then it jumped upon into the United States. And it hit the United States during our first and second Great Awakenings and even the third Great Awakening, because a lot of them were preaching, yes, you need to be saved, but then they preached pietism to go along with that. And it had infected most of Christendom in the United States as a whole. So here we have a heresy that looks pietistic. Oh, yeah, we're heavenly citizens. We don't care what's going on in politics. We could care less of what's going on around us in our environment. And what happened is it infected a lot of the churches. And now the problem is, Brad, we lost the culture because of that. It almost creates a desert father monasticism like Catholicism used to teach, where we retreat from society. And so these churches that are still operating today in Protestantism, they have no impact on whatsoever. So here's the thing. What's the practical aspects of this, Brad? Let me give you an example. Frisco, Texas. So Frisco, Texas has a primary. Only 22% of evangelicals even voted in that primary. But guess who voted? 90% Muslims came out and voted in that primary. Well, what does that tell you? It tells me that the Muslims are more concerned about taking over than the Christians are about worrying about the environment they live in. And I want to say, hey, Christian, you're not going to vote, right? And so we're going to lose ground because of this, and Muslims will take over. Do you like to live in Londanistan? Would you like to live in Paris where the Muslims have taken over? Because they will take over. And this is what Christians are not getting. I'll give you another example. Ilhan Omar. Phil Haney, the late Phil Haney, told me he campaigned in that area for a Republican over Ilhan Omar. And as you know, Ilhan Omar won her district. But when I asked Phil, I said, well, what happened in the voting? And I go, was it just a bunch of Muslims that voted for her? Was it all the Somalis that voted for her? He goes, no, it wasn't that, Brandon. He goes, that's true. They did vote for her. He goes, but here's the problem. We lost the vote for Ilhan Omar by 30,000 ballots. And he goes, you know why? Because only 20% of the evangelicals voted in that district. And he goes, if only 30,000 Christians would have voted, Ilhan would have never got in place. So right there, Brad, is where the rubber meets the road. Those are real world examples of us losing elections because Christians are so stupid and don't want to go out and vote and so pietistic and think they don't want to get their hands dirty. They lose elections for us. That's what the problem is. And we're losing the culture because of it.
We are. And you mentioned all the things that the DSA promises, free housing, universal, all these things. And, but along with that comes higher taxes, universal government finance this and tuition-free higher education. They promise all these things, but along with that comes a tremendous amount of control. And one of the things they control, Brandon, historically, communism has controlled religion. They have controlled what the masses want to think religiously. And the Bible says the church is the pillar and buttress of truth. So if we lose the truth, then there goes the rest of society. And with that, we have our eyes on Israel because we're watching this red-green axis take place in the United States. Basically, there's only one country that is still supporting Israel. That's the United States for now. What's going to happen when these Palestinians are taking over, these Muslims and Islamists are taking over in our government and start pulling the support for Israel?
Well, we already saw a preview of what can happen. Okay, so if you have this red-green alliance, which is truly happening, which is a strange bedfellows, but they have a common enemy, and that's why they're grouped together. The common enemy is us, Christians, the West, Israel, the Jews. So we're there. So this common enemy, we saw this during COVID. Okay, and here's what happened, and here was the test case. Would the churches do exactly what the government said? Well, guess what? 75% of churches in the United States took PPP money and shut down for nearly a year. Okay, there's the test right there. I don't even have to guess anymore, Brad. If something was to happen, we get a different administration and we get a more totalitarian administration and authoritarian administration, I know exactly what would the churches do. 75% of them already folded. They didn't pass the test. And so my guess would be it would probably be the same or worse next time something comes down the pipe. And it's going to be worse because they learned from that we can manipulate people through fear. And that's what the communists will always do, and that's what the Islamists will always do. So that hasn't went away. It will just come back, and we will fail as a church at large. Not you, not me, because we will always stand against it. But in general, most of the churches will collapse on that.
And we're watching churches gather around the anti-Semitism instead of pushing back against the anti-Semitism. Let me read something from your article you wrote. You said, the danger is not that the United States will become the Soviet Union. The danger is that Americans will gradually surrender economic independence, private property rights, constitutional safeguards, and individual responsibility in exchange for promises of security, equity, and government provision. Aren't we seeing that happen now?
Gosh, yeah. It's sickening that people are willing to give up these God-given liberties, these God-given rights. We said this is self-evident. Okay, we said that. It's God-given. We said this is self-evident. And these people, even Christians who don't know their Bible apparently, are willing to give up their rights for what? Peace and security. They'll give up their rights for their job, for their income, for this, and they will sell themselves out. And here's the problem. We have not taught, not you and me, but the church has not taught the right brand of Christianity. They have taught, soft-pedaled a Joel Osteen, you're never going to suffer, never going to sacrifice type of Christianity. In fact, it's the opposite. Christianity demands that you sacrifice, that you become a living sacrifice, and you must be willing to lose your life in order to gain it. That's what true Christianity teaches. If people understand that God requires sacrifice, not just for salvation with the Messiah, but a personal sacrifice on each believer's part, a living sacrifice, we must be willing to give up our income. We must be willing to give up our job for the truth. And that's what a lot of Christians do not want to give up. They are not willing to become a living sacrifice because they have been told Jesus is a life enhancer. Jesus is your buddy. Jesus doesn't demand anything of you. You're just fine the way you are. And that's what's preached in most of the pulpits here. But it's not Christianity. There's no, you need to change. You need to repent. You need to grow. Those messages are not taught. There's no conviction or whatever. So the problem is we are set up, Brad, and I don't know how to reverse it. I don't think you can reverse it. I mean, you got guys like you, myself, and of course our core pastors that we know that are remnant pastors that are doing it, but that's the minority. That's not the majority of people.
And I often wonder, do people really understand? The people that are parroting these things or listening to the CNN or all the, these other news networks, are they really understanding what's going on? And you give a good example of the ignorance of and the level of deception that's happening in the world. Recently, Bill Maher gone on his show, and I mean, of all people, Bill Maher is sounding an alarm. And you said people who had assembled to hear a liberal comedian audibly gasped when confronted with the actual statements of what's going on in the Democratic Party, this DSA, this Karl Marx principle of taking everything from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. What happened there?
Well, interesting enough, I was with you in Gettysburg, and it was a Saturday night, and I was flipping through the channels that night, and Bill Maher came on. And I just sat there and listened to him, and I heard what he said. And here's what he said. He was telling the audience, if you think these people are like us with a liberal mindset, you're wrong. They're radical. They believe in no private ownership. They believe that there needs to be a restructuring of our Constitution, or really the elimination of the Constitution. They believe you should abolish police, ICE, and prisons. They believe you should expand governmental authority. And he just continued to go on. And that's where the gasping happened in his audience, because none of them realized that these candidates support that. But again, what did he do? He went right to the DSA website and just said, look, this is what they say. And that's the problem. These young people that say, oh, yeah, it sounds great. Affordable health care, affordable housing. Pay my debt off. They don't realize what's being proposed is a total deconstruction of the American system. That's what they want, a complete tear it down and we'll rebuild a communist utopia. And that's on them again. But again, what does communism play on? Communism plays on useful idiots. That's where the term comes from. That most of the people have no idea what the communists are up to. And this is how they sell themselves. They soft pedal themselves that they're not communists. So Bernie Sanders says he's not a communist. But the problem is when they get into power, then their radicalness comes out. Okay, like we see with Mondani, right? That he just a nut job radical, man, saying, Mondani doxed, I think it was like 800,000 names of people who owned multiple properties who lived in New York. He doxed them. That's a communist tactic.
And now Robert De Niro, who voted for him, is all upset about the fact that, what he's doing. So, I mean, it's like big surprise here, folks.
Yeah.
Before we get into Islamophobia, let me tell you something that's happening right here not far from us, and it's affecting our church. We have a family that lives in a decent neighborhood. I mean, it's not an affluent, but it's a nice neighborhood. Their property backs up to an elementary school. Okay. And they got word that the house across the street from them was sold to this recovery unit. They're moving in level 3 tier sex offenders into this home, 800 feet from an elementary school. Level 3 tier means they were sadistic in nature with their sex offense, with their child pornography.
Oh my gosh.
800 feet from the elementary school. So they planned a homeowners association meeting to figure out what they can do to shut this down. And they wound up having to cancel it because a local candidate, Democratic candidate, came in and was going to take over the meeting and talk about how this was hateful and they should be celebrating recovery and look at this. And in his comments he was talking about the fact, well, we're allowing ICE detention centers to come in, and these are the same people that won't allow recovery to take place. It's the same narrative that we've got to shut down ICE. Everybody's just got to suck it up. It doesn't matter what that we have to protect our kids. We have an agenda, and that's what's going on. So it's just over and over again. Wow. We're seeing it everywhere we go. Let's talk about the truth of Islamophobia, because that's the thing that comes out the most. Whenever we talk about the red-green axis, we call out these candidates for who they are. What's going on with all this happening around the nation right now?
Well, when you see El Sayed and Mamdani, and then you see these things happening in Texas, like a 400-acre, compound, Muslim compound, and I think it's McKinney, I can't remember, and then another one's popping up. and you see the mayor of I can't remember, it was Detroit, Dearborn, I think. Yeah, Dearborn. That guy, that dude's off the chart, man. And you see all these guys taking over. You got to understand what's behind it. I mean, they talk about Sharia law, and of course, El Sayed talked about Sharia law. That's what he want. His goal is to do Sharia law, and it's like, wait a second, they're telling you what they want. And here's the thing, going back to even Charlie Kirk, when he was warning, I saw a clip of Charlie Kirk making the circulations this week, and he was talking to a Muslim girl that attends a college campus, and she goes, I'm offended that you say there's a problem with Muslims and Islam. He goes, well, here's the thing, the very clothes you're wearing could not be worn in any Muslim country. He goes, name one Muslim country that would allow you to dress the way you are, because you're not going to do that in Riyadh. And so that's the problem with Islam. And see, they want to say, well, you just don't allow freedom of religion. Whoa, no. Islam is not a religion. I'm sorry. It's a political ideology wrapped in the veneer of a religion, because it includes its own constitution called Sharia law and says what its goals are. It's not compatible with Western civilization. So I'm not having a debate with whether a Muslim can practice his religion. I'm having the debate on whether I can assimilate people who want to bring another constitution into my country and want to practice that constitution, and that's called Sharia law. I believe it's incompatible. And I believe it's destroying Europe, which it already has, and it's going to destroy America. So they can call me Islamophobic, but I'm not against Muslim people. I want them to have the gospel. I want them to get saved out of that dark, evil religion. But when I am talking about Islam, I'm talking it as a political movement that we cannot have in the West. It is incompatible. How in the world can we have honor killings? How in the world can we have people who believe that women should not have a voice in a court of law, or that you can rape, according to the Quran and the Hadith, you can rape infidel women, like the rape epidemics that's happening in Europe? Wait a second, I can't have this person in my culture. That's a problem, and it's incompatible. And so why are we allowing people who think like this and want this into our country? I don't care if it's illegal or illegal.
Well, where's the ACLU on this? When we want to put, there are people that want to put the Ten Commandments up in a school, and they have a fit about it, and they're claiming, separation of church and state, separation of church and state. But when these guys come onto the scene and they're pushing their radical agenda, the ACLU is silent.
I know. And that's this double justice that we see, this double standard that we see with the left. They'll keep the standard if we're infringing on their rights or something like that. But if Islam is infringing on someone, they don't say anything. And so it's this classic double standard. And it goes back to what Jesus said. It's a spiritual component. He said a kingdom is not divided against itself. Satan does not cast out Satan. And so that's why the ACLU doesn't cast out, Islam. It's not going to cast itself out. And that's why, obviously they don't do that. But that's what we're working with, and that's what we're up against. But here's the thing, Brad. I'm going back to Christians. If the Christians would just rise up and push back and say, no, we're not doing this, we're not going to allow it, it would stop. The problem is they don't. They don't show up to school boards. They don't protest anything. They sit on their blessed assurance and do what? Nothing. That's the problem. Most Christians are unmotivated to do anything to stop our cultural decline.
You mentioned earlier about the younger generation, and you wrote this: for many young Americans, communism is no longer connected in their minds to forced collectivization, political prisons, religious persecution, censorship, famine, secret police, or mass executions. It has instead become an internet aesthetic, a symbol of rebellion against billionaires, corporations, landlords, traditional morality, Western history, and the United States itself. Brandon, how do we reach this younger generation with the truth?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to, as a biblicist, explain the Christian worldview, and then show them how, in that biblical worldview, that those things are not compatible. And that creates what we call critical thinking. Now, the schools don't teach critical thinking, and neither does the colleges and universities. So it's up to the churches to teach critical thinking now. But that's what we used to do. We would compare worldviews, whether it's Islam or communism. That's what Christians used to do. And that's how we created a biblical worldview. But a biblical worldview is not being taught in the churches anymore. What's being taught is therapy, narcissistic individual therapy, not biblical worldviews. And so that's what our churches have turned into, is a therapy session, a group setting. Let's sit around and talk about our issues instead of, wait a second, what is the mindset that we should be having to confront this pagan mentality that we're seeing? But that's not being taught. It's just narcissistic therapy that's being taught in the churches. So we have to teach a biblical worldview, which means what? What does that imply, Brad? If I'm going to teach a biblical worldview, that means I can't cherry pick the scripture. That means I got to teach the whole counsel of God from Genesis to Revelation. But you know, and I know, what are these pastors doing? They're cherry picking their way through the scriptures on the niceties. Well, let's preach this passage. Jesus loves me. And let's do that 28 times instead of, hey, what about Genesis chapter 6? What about Genesis chapter 10 and 11? Let's talk about a biblical worldview as opposed to a Babylonian worldview. They won't do that because it doesn't sell.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head right there. They're teaching a narcissistic therapy because the pastors themselves are narcissists leading these congregations for their own gain. And you wrote this statement, and I highlighted it and I underlined it. When students are taught what to think rather than how to think, political ideology becomes a substitute for careful historical analysis. I think that it sums up the whole article right there of why this matters. Speaking of that, we're talking a lot about politics here, and a lot of Christians get really, tense and wrapped around the axles about, when we have political discussions. Why should Christians be concerned about this politically and spiritually? And what do you say to those who say we shouldn't get involved in these political agendas?
Well, here's what I would say, and I laugh about that because it's just ridiculous with what they think. The whole Old Testament is a showcase of how the spiritual speaks to the political. And Brandon, they would say, well, what do you mean? The prophets were sent to the kings to tell them this is what God says. And it's over and over and over again, all the way ending to, with John the Baptist getting beheaded. And again, what was going on? Well, we're concerned about the gospel. No doubt about that. But here's what they have to understand as a Christian. If they've ever studied missiology in seminary, and this is what they would need to understand. We need environments where the gospel can spread. If you live in an environment like China, communist China, or in Iran, it can't spread as freely as it can in Western society because everything has to be done underground. Now, does the gospel get out? It sure does, but not at the level that it did in Western society because of the freedoms we have of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And this is what people need to understand. The gospel is more effective when it's in a freer environment. It can spread faster, okay? Under communism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, it's very difficult. But it happens, but it's underground. Okay, so my point is, we need to concern ourselves about the environment if we're concerned about getting the gospel out. Because I want a freer environment. It allows the gospel. So that means I need to vote. That means I am worried about Sharia law because I don't want to live in a society that if I say, hey, you know what? Islam is evil. Islam is from Satan. Islam is not, it's a false religion. If I am not free to say that, Brad, then I will lose my right, a free speech. And then I can't warn anybody about this. I can't warn the young people about this. And that's what's happening in Europe. They can't say anything about Islam. Nothing. They can't even warn about it. Tommy Robinson is warning about it, and the British government's after him all the time, putting him in and out of jail constantly for demonizing Islam, as he should demonize them.
Right. I'm often telling my congregation or other people, when we lose our First Amendment, things are going to get bad really quick for churches and believers who are standing up for the truth. So we need to protect that. We need to be involved in handling that and speaking out the truth. Brandon, always incredible talking with you. You always bring so much to the table, and just so appreciate your friendship with us at Coming Soon Ministries and Crossway Christian Fellowship. What's going on with you? And also, how can people find out more and read more of your blogs that we've referenced here today?
Yeah, just go to brandonholthaus.com. My blogs are usually on my website. And then, again, we're working with Israel. As you know, you've partnered with us different times. And you can go to rockharborchurch.net. If anyone wants to help out Israel, go to our giving tab and say to bless Israel, because I know a lot of people want to help Israel. And we're doing that, obviously, on the ground, buying equipment for them, getting drones and things of that nature. And so we've opened up a whole ministry there. We've got guys on the ground there in Israel, so it's amazing. So we're doing that, obviously speaking at conferences and stuff like that. I'm going to be going to Israel in October with Tom and Olivier. So we're going to be doing that. And so, very active. But here's the thing, and I want to impress this on everybody. We're running out of time. We need to be about the Lord's work, and we need to get the word out there as much as we can. And so that's my admonition to everybody, man.
I appreciate that word, and we'll close with that word. We'll put links to your church and your ministry on our channel here. And please, if you need a church home, you can't find anybody in the area, that he's in Bakersfield, California. Great church. Love coming out and visiting with you, man. And you can always watch them online too. So please get tuned in with Brandon and get tuned in with his website to find out. He's putting out blogs almost weekly now, right? He's coming out pretty regularly, and what he's putting out is incredible and timely. Brandon, we're out of time. Good seeing you, man, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, brother. Love you, man. Keep up the great work.
Love you too. Take care.
Okay, man.